Good morning, and it is the eve of Christmas. It is December 24th, 2025, and on my morning walk today, I had an idea for a video, which is what this video is. This is a video about a subject that I've never actually talked specifically about, and that would be about exhausts and the necessity of them, what they do, why we have to have them. So I am completely unafraid to show my complete ignorance on the technical aspects and probably just about every aspect of exhausts and mufflers that we have to utilize in this hobby. And I say that because honestly I don't really think too much about it, but a lot of this spurred from a comment that someone made to me just recently. They were asking about, they had a specific engine and they said, can I run it without a muffler? And my answer to that person was, yes, you can. As far as I know, internal combustion engines do not require mufflers or exhausts. So before we go any deeper into this discussion, let me just say that there is a difference between an exhaust or an exhaust system and a muffler. Many of you probably know that. Many of you probably don't care, but I believe that those two words, exhaust and muffler, can incorrectly be used synonymously in this hobby, and many people will just say, well, this is an exhaust, this is an exhaust, this is a muffler. And for just clarity, I'm just going to say that I'm just going to call things mufflers unless it's specifically a header. Like this. This is what I would consider just a header. So an exhaust system, at least on a car or motorcycle, well, car I'll talk about, includes an exhaust manifold, then pipes, and on a car, now, a catalytic converter, a muffler, and then an exhaust pipe. A muffler is just a muffler. So the question was asked, does my engine require a muffler to run? I believe was the question, and the answer is no, because if you look back in time, at the beginning of everything, at the beginning of all combustion engines, when they first came out, none of them had exhausts or mufflers. Now, if you look back into the golden age of RC, when RC first started out, none of those engines had exhausts or mufflers at all. They were all what they considered open exhaust, and if you read a lot of the reviews for older engines, they'll also state RPM values for open exhaust or with the supplied muffler. So yes, engines can run without them. So then the next question would be, well, then why the heck do we have them? And I don't know the entire story. I can only surmise from what I think I know about it. And the fact is, I think the advent of mufflers started probably around the mid to late 70s. And when I got into the hobby in '88, everything had mufflers for the most part. So the reason, as far as I understand it, is that it was basically non-modelers complaining about the noise generated by our hobby, by these engines. And the noise is, it's pretty significant sometimes. Now, if you're flying in the air, that's where most non-flyers or non-hobbyists would complain, because you're flying over houses or whatever and they don't like the sound or whatever. So I think that's where that really started. And then, of course, due to complaints and people losing fields and stuff like that, the governing bodies and corporations mandated that all engines must come equipped with, or at least have an option of, an exhaust. Now, whether this all happened at the same period in time across North America, Europe, Asia, I don't know. All I know is what I can see from the review articles from engines that have been coming into the United States. So, with that said, that's why. Now, do they serve a purpose? Well, of course they serve a purpose, and this just so happens to be an OS 855 muffler that fits on an OS BX1. It can also be fitted on an OS 91 FSR engine. And a similar exhaust or similar muffler to this, I think just has an extension, also can be fitted on the BGX1, BX1 and the BGX1. So anyway, this is a muffler. And if you really want to get technical, you could say that this is an exhaust. I guess, and say, here's our exhaust manifold and here's the muffler. So there are several purposes of the muffler on an airplane. And first and foremost, one of the things is to direct exhaust gases out away from the airframe or out away from the engine and out to a direction that you would desire. That's why many of these have rotational end cones so that you can rotate that and direct that exhaust out, because the exhaust gases contain oil. And oil is obviously a component of our fuel, and it's the lubricating constituent of our fuel, and not all of it gets consumed, so it comes out, and everybody knows that. Everybody that's flown has always complained about, I have to clean up my airplane after flying because there's oil all over it. Well, guess what? That's tough shit. That's the way it is if you like glow engines. So it directs oil away from, to some degree, not always the best, but it directs it away from the engine compartment for the most part. But then you'll see that there's also a pressure tap here. So they started putting these pressure taps on here, and I don't know why, because as I said, engines run fine without exhaust, or without mufflers, without pressure taps. At least they used to, unless that was also something that changed in history also. Maybe they changed the design of engines such that they required that, because what this does is it just provides a little bit of back pressure back into the fuel tank to help with fuel delivery. It's just, as the combustion cycle goes, there's pulses. And a little bit of pulsing goes in there, and it doesn't act as a pump. It just acts as a little bit of a pressure going back into the fuel tank. And that's why in an airplane that's equipped with an engine with an exhaust or a muffler on here, you really need to minimize the length of all of your fuel line connections, because if that's supposed to provide a little bit of tank pressure, what's the purpose of that? Well, the purpose of that is to provide just a little bit of assistance in fuel flow into the carburetor if the carburetor, for whatever reason, is in an inverted position or whatever, and it's not able to draw adequately. So it's going to add just a little bit. Just a little bit. Will an engine run fine without that? Absolutely. Like I said, unless they began to design engines such that that was a requirement, that, it has to have this little minute amount. I don't know. A lot of engines don't have, or a lot of mufflers don't have that at all. This is a Rossi muffler, and this one goes on a Rossi 60 size engine. And so can they run without them? As far as I know, they can. I don't like to do that personally because I value my hearing because they're loud. But same thing with four-stroke engines. I mean, here's an example of a four-stroke engine that has just an exhaust header. It runs beautifully without it, sounds beautiful without a muffler attached. Here is a typical four-stroke muffler. Or you could say exhaust system, because here's the exhaust manifold, basically, maybe, and here is the muffler. Again, pressure tap. This is from a Sato or a Sato 91S. Here's another example of another engine that just runs with a header. So especially four-strokes really can run fine without them. In fact, I prefer not having a muffler on there just because I like the sound of it better with the header, because four-strokes generate a lower tone anyway and combust every fourth stroke as opposed to every stroke, so they're just a little bit quieter anyway. But so anyway, what I've got here is just a whole, I could have filled this table with mufflers to show you all the different types, but I think I've got enough here to make a point. And the point I'm really trying to make here is, I don't know all the physics of these things, but I know that the exhaust outlet size contributes significantly to, possibly how well the engine breathes and how perhaps the amount of power that can be produced. So, and I started thinking about this a few days ago because I just acquired this beautiful engine. This is an HP 61. It's actually, the official designation of this is the HP 61F, I believe, is what I think I saw in the manual, or the review. I think it replaced the FS, 61FS. But this engine came out in about 1977, at least that's when the review article was, and you can see 77, they had this thing here, exhaust manifold, that could fit a muffler. However, it isn't drilled. So it's one of those things where you can tell the difference between, and this didn't come with a muffler at all. You can tell kind of the age of an engine by this, if A, they are sold without a muffler. I mean, some OS engines were sold without mufflers because a lot of helicopter engines aren't sold with mufflers because they want you to get your own or whatever. But if it's not drilled, then obviously it wasn't really designed for that. Or it tells you about the age because that means that it requires a clamp-on style muffler. And I really dislike clamp-on mufflers. They're just really kind of a pain in the butt. And it took me I've fitted this. Now this is an exhaust that a fellow Ed from England sent to me. He sent it to me specifically to go on a Weber engine. But this is a Weber exhaust. It came in a Weber box. Now, this is for a Weber 40, believe it or not. And that's why I thought it was amazing when I first got this and showed this, is that the size of the outlet. I was like, this looks like a 60 size exhaust. I mean, here's a 60 size exhaust. They're not that different in outlet size. Here's a much larger exhaust, 108, 91. Not really that much larger. So it's like, and here's an exhaust for a 61 SF. That's a little bit smaller. So it's like, I thought this looked like it would be for a 60 size engine. Well, I also just recently, this came with an MVVS 6.5 or 40 size engine. And of course this is just a header designed to have a tuned pipe on it. I don't have a tuned pipe on it. But when I showed that engine a few days ago, I showed it with this exhaust and how I was hoping that maybe I could fit this exhaust on there and it would fit fine. I would have to cut these ridges off or these guides off. And I really didn't like the idea of that. Well, then this engine came in the mail and it fits perfectly. I mean, perfectly. And it looks beautiful because this is like a polished looking exhaust muffler, and this is a polished, chromed out. So I mean, so this is the exhaust that is the muffler that's going to go on this engine, and I've already fitted it on here. But it's like, this is a 60, 61, and this is a 40 size exhaust, but yet with the outlet size, I think this muffler will be perfect for this engine. Absolutely perfect. Which is confusing because it's like, well, if this was designed for a 40 size engine, because here's another 40 size exhaust. This goes on an older Enya 40 or 45, probably from the early 80s. But look at the size of that. I mean, heck, the whole outer portion of that exhaust can almost fit in the rear end of that thing. So it's like, you know, and of course there's a lot of physics that is involved in the design of these things, and I can't speak to those things at all, but it's like, you know, why can't this, I think this will breathe fine on this beautiful engine, even though it's a 40 size exhaust. But here's another Weber exhaust. This is another 40 size Weber, and yet look how much different. I mean, look at this. These are two Weber exhausts, and they're both for 40 size engines. So riddle me that, Batman. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, the engines are not exactly this. I don't know if they're exactly the same. They're both 40 size engines. One maybe a Silverline or a Blackhead or something like that. Here's another Rossi style exhaust. This one came from a Pico Skyward 40 engine. But this also gives me an opportunity to show off another Enya engine and another Enya exhaust. And so this, you know, kind of demarcates a timeline in history with this clamp-on style, and then they started making these bolt-on mufflers. And this is this beautiful Enya 45 CX engine that I've got. I bought this new, got a brand new head on it, and it's all cleaned up, and I just like to show off that engine because it's super sweet. But on a final note for exhaust, so here's a KNB 35 engine, and I showed this engine a few days ago also, but it has this very interesting exhaust, which I'm not sure, I'm certain somebody can give me the name of this, that's just a complete open flow-through thing. And somebody had made a mention that, yeah, I bet this thing really produces or increases the power of the engine. It probably does. Does this portion still do much of anything? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about exhausts or mufflers. And this one just is weird because it just kind of almost looks homemade in the way the welds are and the way it's been. I think somebody actually polished this after the fact. But I mean, just the way the welds are, it almost kind of looks like a homemade type of thing as opposed to, you know, a mass-produced thing. But I'm pretty sure it was a mass-produced exhaust or muffler because I think I've seen these before on other engines. But anyway, so that is kind of like my little foray into a video that talks primarily about mufflers and exhaust systems. And, you know, the exhausts and mufflers are almost like people. I mean, they come in all shapes and sizes, and you know, I guess the question is, do you have to have them? Technically, yes, you do if you're flying at least in the United States, at an AMA sanctioned field. But if you're a fortunate person that can do whatever the hell they want on their own property away from population, no, you don't have to have an exhaust. That's not my official word, that's just how I would operate. But personally, you know, I would always use an exhaust just because, you know, I don't know. Something about running an engine without an exhaust just kind of bothers me. I mean, I know there are instances with some of these little control line or free flight engines where you have to, but I don't care for it personally. I would always run a muffler on these things. But anyway, so that is my Christmas Eve video for 2025, and thank you all for watching.